So to kick us off, we're starting with the place where most change begins, our everyday habits. Our first speaker is Darcy Lunn. Great, got that right. Founder of Teaspoons of Change. Darcy created the concept after literally walking and cycling thousands of kilometres to explore a simple question. What are the small choices we can make in our daily lives that positively impact people and the planet? From that experience, he developed the idea that small actions multiplied by millions of people can create transformational change. Please join me in welcoming Darcy.
Yeah, big step up. Do we have a clickery thing? There we go. Thanks, Tegan. That was a lovely introduction. That's the perfect foundation for the concept that I have called Teaspoons of Change. So just quickly to acknowledge our traditional regenerative custodians and sustainability experts. Whatever I say will be chicken feed compared to our Indigenous heritage and those people who knew how to live with the land in a very regenerative kind of way. So just wanting to acknowledge that. So I usually start here with these big set of goals called the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. There's 17 of them, if that's not enough to get your head around. They've got nice colours, nice pictures, but really they're too big for us to try and fit into our daily lives. So on the back of that, that's why I created this idea of Teaspoons of Change. So with all of these things, this is often where most people start their journey towards trying to take action or feel like their actions matter. It's plastic police, a moral bashing, a guilt trip, wearing the weight of the world on your shoulders, and this idea of perfection paralysis. So most of us, start from overwhelm, and my job, I go and work mainly in schools with students, is to just provide a little welcome mat and a safe space to come in and start thinking about, well, how do my actions fit into something bigger than myself without feeling the weight of the world on our shoulders. There's lots of buzzwords out there, they're all very nice, etc., but what I try and do is connect our personal feelings with at least one of these words, so that there's actually a visceral connection between our actions and something bigger than ourselves. So yeah, all of those things, they're nice, they're useful, but I think as a starting point, for me, it's to think about, well, how do I fit into something like this? And these global goals are fairly overwhelming. There's 17 goals, 169 targets, 212 indicators, blah, blah, blah. So what about for me as one individual? And so Teaspoons of Change is only a vocabulary. Like I have a few bits and pieces that I do, but really it's for people to use those words for something that they can't see. That plastic bottle that we don't use, we can't really see the impact of it. So Teaspoons of Change tries to put a label onto that sort of thing. So these global goals are there for us to feel a greater sense and a greater sense of purpose and feel good about the actions we can take. So it's very much that sort of positive model. So those goals are just a plan for us to try and end extreme poverty, reduce inequality and protect our planet. And as Tegan said, as one person, we can't just click our fingers and make these things happen, but it's nice that a plan exists. Now, are the global goals perfect? Certainly not. They're very neoliberal, neo-colonial. A bunch of white guys like me probably created them and said, right, here you go, world, off, you're all set, off you go. But I feel like I have two choices. One is to throw rocks at them and say how terrible they are, or to embrace them. 193 countries have agreed upon them. And then how do we shape them into something that's actually meaningful? So that's kind of the idea. And a quick question for you, do you think we'll achieve these goals by 2030? So to end extreme poverty, reduce inequality and protect our planet. And they're designed from 2015 to 2030. Raise your hand if you don't think we will achieve those goals. Yeah, of course, no chance at all. But it's better to have those goals than to not have them, I personally believe. Like they're aspirational. And the question I like to frame is, can we achieve those goals? And yes, of course we can, if we're able to coordinate and collaborate and do all those sorts of things. Are we going to? Not a chance. But I think the world is better off having them than not having them. And so for me, I think it's really important to have this balance of optimism and realism. So we need to remain optimistic, otherwise we just give up. There's climate change here, AI there, wars here, etc. I'm not going to bother getting out of bed. So I need a good dose of optimism. But then, I work with a lot of students, and the year 5 students think, oh, turning off the lights is going to save the world. And then they crash, a couple of weeks later when they hear a report or some of the realities of the world come in. So it is that balance of optimism and realism. Not that I would put too much of the realism part on young people's shoulders and minds, but also I'm not going to sell them a pipe dream and say teaspoons of change is turning off the lights and everything will be fine. And really the connection point for teaspoons of change is when you do turn off that light, it's a connection between your hand, your head and your heart. Because your head is reminding you to turn that light off, because your heart has told you that this is something important, because it does fit into something bigger than myself. And that's the connection point that's really worth having. The bit of electricity you save, that's lovely, that's nice. But if we can make those connections, then we're really starting to feel like our actions matter. Are they going to solve all the world problems? Not at all. Is it better to do something than to do nothing? Absolutely. And to feel good about being able to do that. So if you're looking for good doses of optimism, there's plenty of people in the room who will be talking about that. But one of my favourites is the happy broadcast, and one recently, the Fix the News. If you've seen that one, I've only just recently found it. I love it. So it's a good dose of optimism. So Fix the News and the happy broadcast. My students love that cows eating seaweed reduces their emissions from their farts. They really get into that. But there are lots of good people doing good things in the world. We just often need a reminder. It doesn't pop up in our normal social media or news feeds very often about the good news stories. So that is a big tip. Project Drawdown is another lovely source of information and inspiration. So teaspoons of change for me is just kind of a way to see the world, to look through that lens of feeling like, yes, I'm just one person, but my personal choices, decisions and actions fit somewhere into the world, hopefully. So yeah, my name's Darcy Lunn. I've been really fortunate to work with lots of different organisations over quite a few years around the world, and featuring a few tiny houses and things like that as well. And a strange spelling, that's my mum's fault, but that's okay. So one teaspoon of change that I took was to not buy single-use plastic bottles, and I made that choice 15 years ago because it was still at the time where we thought buying bottled water was a bit stupid. It's very normal now, but back then it was still like, why would you buy bottled water? We've got tap water. And I was like, yeah, I'm not doing that. And so I counted, this was after about 8 years, I counted the average number of single-use bottles for the average Australian, counted them up, and that's 8 years worth of single-use plastic bottles that I didn't use. Did I save the world? Not a chance. But when the moment comes, after a long run with Loz or someone, and all I want is a nice cold drink of lemonade or whatever, I'm not going to do it because the feeling that I get from not using that single-use plastic is greater than the feeling I'm going to get from my refreshing drink. And, there's water and stuff most of the time anyway. So I really enjoy making good choices and celebrating those things and not saying, hey, I'm saving the planet. It's a nice thing to do, but feeling good about my choices and how I fit into the world. So that's kind of the key part of that. And I want to love waking up on Mondays. That's really important. So it is a perspective, a way of seeing the world, and so that all my choices feel like they matter. I've got to ride to the next thing fairly soon. It's going to be wet, it's going to be tired, but it's important to me to make that journey and actually enjoy it, rather than seeing it as a hassle or as a detriment to my life. And then a little provocation here is this idea of global citizenship. Again, one of those buzzwords that I usually unpack with students and corporates and these sorts of things. So this question of what is a global citizen is a bit of a boring one. I much prefer this one of, are you a global citizen? What do you think? Take a moment to think of that one. Are you a global citizen at a very personal, practical level? So what is a global citizen will get you thinking of a definition, whereas this is like, oh, God, I actually have to look into my own glass house and see what's floating around in here. The answer is yes, no, maybe, whatever, unless you really think you are, and I'll be checking for your certification of global citizenship. But it's an exploration. So this is a very open-ended question of, what does it mean to me to have this word global citizen? Is it the number of languages I speak, or the number of countries I've been to, or is it how altruistic I am and how many choices I try and make on a daily basis? So to define these kind of ideas for ourselves. And if I do get cornered for almost a definition or a concept, then what does it mean to be a good person? And what does a good person do? And that's an endless pursuit. No one can perfect those two questions at all. I would say Jesus didn't even quite nail it. But it is a lovely pursuit for us to try and work towards and think about those things. So for me, it's about getting into the game and not feeling that sense of overwhelm and trying to find opportunities where we can try and make good choices that help us to be good and active people in our community. So this is kind of the wrap-up, is teaspoons of change, small actions that have a positive impact, or call it whatever you want, helps us become kind of better or more effective global citizens, and that contributes to those big global goals. So it's just nice to have that collective context that exists in our world and making that connection between personal and something bigger than ourselves. And this does work in reverse. If we want to achieve these global goals, if we can think and act as global citizens and try and think about those actions that we can take. And that's just to reduce our harm and increase our help when and where we can as much as possible. And it's taken me 15 years to come up with some provocations that work in most situations, but it was worth it. But these work in education, but also in the workplace, all these kind of things. Like what's the most ethical and sustainable pair of shoes that I could be wearing? Is it going to be perfect? I don't know, but the pursuit of these kind of provocations are really important. What's the practical, real-world application of a lesson if you're in a school, or your sustainability agenda, these sorts of things. So making sure it has a real-world context, and then getting different perspectives on the things that we do. What does this topic or this conversation look like from a rural Nigerian female farmer? I have no idea, but it's a really nice way to be thinking about things from different perspectives, so that I'm questioning my South Australian white male agenda on everything, as much as I try not to. And then I like a couple of more, like if Mother Nature was in the room, what would she say? That's a really friendly, nice one for those meetings that we might be having, conversations at university, and setting a perspective for a future generation. So I love doing that in a meeting or a boardroom or something like that. There's an empty seat where, I metaphorically place a future generation and see what they might say in this conversation. And then, what are the practical and personal teaspoons of change that we might bring into this moment? Again, not saying, right, I've got to do this out of guilt, but I'm going to do this out of opportunity. And then any others that people come up with. And I'm firing up a bit of an online course with a few other people as well. I don't really have a program and those sorts of things, but pulling together my resources to try and say, hey, actually I think that QR code doesn't work, by the way. I tested it just before. But Arenda are awesome. So just trying to come along with some tips and some quips, very, practical, easy to come by ideas and solutions for us to kind of get on the bandwagon for that. And then good people doing good things. So I kind of lay a few foundations and then set it up for folks to take over and do all their wonderful stuff. Pledge for the Planet, lovely little run club there, Bicycle New South Wales, and then in that kind of production business space as well, like probably the most ethical and sustainable phone, the Fairphone from the Netherlands, modular, replaceable. Ben & Jerry's, they're going about their sustainability practices and things in a really robust kind of way. So celebrating good people doing good things. And my favourite, I do like running. So Tarkine, I think, are probably the most ethical and sustainable running shoes. They've tried to work out how to circular every single component of the shoe. So lots of good people doing good things out there. An old favourite of Interface. I'm not a salesperson for any of these people, but just showing that there are good people doing good things out in the world. And of course that B Corp certification is a lovely thing to look for us. So I'll leave you on that note. What are your teaspoons of change? Good luck with your adventures. Make a list at home or at school or on your fridge with the kids or whoever. And hopefully this idea that small actions multiplied by lots of people can and will create big change. So is that definitely going to happen? I can't say, but trying to make it happen is definitely worthwhile. So thank you for having me this morning, and that's my little teaspoon of change. This is, a young girl in Pakistan, an Afghan refugee in Pakistan. I was there when she had her first 2 drops of polio vaccine, and we've almost eradicated the second human disease in history with 2 drops done billions of times over. So it's a pretty cool example of small actions multiplied by lots of people. I better get on my bike and I've got to leave impromptu, but thank you very much for having me. Thanks, Oz. Thanks, everyone.